Sean Lynn in the pub for a Dram with friends, where we talk about faith, family, food, and fun. Pull up a chair and I'll pour you a drink. Episode 76. We are extremely excited to have Jimmy Akin join us as he's unlocking the mystery of God and the world. Sit back and I pour us a dram. Welcome to another episode of A Dram with Friends. We are extremely excited to have Jimmy Akin join us in the pub today. He's a new friend, but an old friend if you listen to his podcasts like Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World or Catholic Answers. So welcome, Jimmy.
My pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
So I asked you what kind of whiskey I'd pour you if you were here in the pub with me. You said a Canadian. Mm-hmm. Canadian whiskey tends to be rye, but I thought I'd combine it. I've got a nice Texas rye here.
Okay.
From Balcones.
Made from the grain rye, R-Y-E?
Yes,
okay.
R-Y-E.
I didn't know that. I'm afraid I'm not actually very knowledgeable about whiskey. It's not my. I have not found many forms that I like, and so the whiskeys, Canadian, I have found the most tolerable. So
there you go, people. We have found something that Jimmy Akin doesn't know very much about something. Mm-hmm. We've had our first miracle today. So I don't know if you know, but you probably do, that a dram is a measurement of 1/8 of an ounce. And I rarely get that little amount in a glass, but I keep trying. So.
Okay, yeah, it's also equivalent to, in different measurement systems, it's equivalent to a few grams worth, but those are weights rather than fluid measurement. There
you go. I saw you puffing on your pipe when we first got on. Unfortunately, I've got mine here, but my wife said even if I have Jimmy Akin on the pub, I can't smoke in the house. So
okay,
and you know that honor your wife.
Gotta get along together. Yeah.
So, actually, Jeff Caven on our motorcycle rides, he's the one that got me into pipes, and I see in your background you've got quite a collection there.
Yeah, I don't know if it'll be obvious to your viewers if we're split screen, but on the bookshelf behind me, I have a good chunk of my pipe collection.
So, for those that don't know, who is Jimmy Akin?
Well, to quote my personal brain care specialist, Gag Halfront, well, he's just this guy, you know.
So, how does one be?
I can be a little more forthcoming than that.
Okay.
So, let's see. I was born in Texas. I was raised in the Ozark Mountains in Arkansas, and I'm in my 30th year now as the senior apologist for Catholic Answers in San Diego, California. In addition to the apologetics work I do, in which I publish articles and books and blog posts and give talks and interviews, I also am a podcaster, and I appear on a number of podcasts, the most famous of which is Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. We have more than 100,000 listeners per episode, and when we release new episodes, they've been peaking between number 8 and number 10 on the Apple documentary podcasts chart in the U.S. So it's peaking in the top 10.
That's awesome. And I asked my wife, because she listens more faithfully than I do, if she knew where you were born. That's why I picked the Texas rye. Balcones in Waco. So
I've been to Waco.
Michelle and I stopped by there this past November. Yeah, it's a nice place to, especially in the winter for us.
Uh-huh.
It gets a little chilly up here.
Yeah, it doesn't get quite as chilly in Texas, although it gets chillier than it does in San Diego. When I first moved out to San Diego in 1993, I went home for the holidays, and I had a layover in Dallas, and as soon as I got off the airplane in Dallas, it's like I'm not in California anymore. It's actually cold here, and I'd forgotten to bring a winter coat.
There you go. Yeah, I can't think of anywhere more beautiful than San Diego. A friend of mine took me down there. We were scouting out some house building in Mexico there, just across the border. So it's a beautiful place. And don't you have very steady weather? Pretty much.
Yes. Yeah, that's the thing about San Diego in particular. It has the lowest temperature variation during the course of the year of any major city in the U.S. It's because of the way we're situated between the ocean and the mountains, and that keeps the temperature quite steady. Although there are periods during the year where it gets a little warmer or a little colder. There are periods of the year where it rains, and then our hills turn green for a couple of months, and then they go back to their usual brown. And also in May and June, we have a lot of marine layer overcast that comes in off the ocean at night. And so we have gloomy skies for a few hours in the morning, and that's known as the May gray and the June gloom.
Whereas I'm not sure if you're familiar with the term Chinook.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Here in Calgary, the new president for St. Mary's University is from Waco, and explaining to them we can have temperature variations in huge swings when a Chinook comes in, because it'll be minus 20 Celsius, and then we can be up to 10 plus Celsius in less than a day. So,
Uh-huh.
so we get quite large swings.
We don't have as much rapid temperature swings. I mean, it does get hot in the summers. It doesn't really get cold in the winters. But we do have, so like it's not a Chinook, but we have a wind that comes in off the Arizona desert during certain times of the year, and it will blow all the humidity out to sea. And as a result of that, the atmosphere can become very dry, and you'll be walking around and shock yourself on all kinds of things. And growing up in Arkansas, I was used to, in the wintertime, occasionally shocking myself if I touched something metal. But when I moved out here the first year, I was like shocking myself constantly, touching stuff. And I went to a friend and I said, who at Catholic Answers, I said, is this just me, or is this something else? And she said, it's the wind from Arizona.
There you go. So how does one become a senior Catholic apologist?
Well, step one is become an apologist, and step two is learn a lot, and step three is be here a long time.
There you go. And we're all called to be number one there, aren't we?
Well, we're all called to do what we can apologetically. Different people have different gifts and different specialties and different aptitudes. We should all, as St. Peter says, be ready to give a reason for the hope of the faith that is in us when somebody asks us. That can be a very simple thing to do, though. It doesn't mean, it doesn't mean you have to be a specialist in apologetics. But we are all called to have at least a basic knowledge of how to present the faith to inquirers.
And that's important, especially for men, just being able to share when you're sitting in the pub when they're asking those hard questions, being able to just have an honest answer for them.
Mm-hmm.
So how did Mysterious World come about?
Well, I've always had an interest in mysterious subjects, which is what we look at on Mysterious World. And I grew up in the 1970s. And back then, there were loads of documentaries about and TV specials about UFOs and Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster and things like that. And then later, there were also shows like Leonard Nimoy's In Search Of, which was devoted to mysteries.
Yep.
Arthur C. Clarke had a few series like this, and then in the late 80s and in the 1990s, there was the Robert Stack Unsolved Mysteries series, which my wife
Yep.
was a big fan of, and she and I would watch it together. Then in the early 2000s, I took a road trip around the Southwest. I went home and visited Arkansas, but on the way I stopped off in Roswell, New Mexico, and I saw all of the Roswell experience with all the UFO stuff in town. And it got me thinking, someday I might write a book about mysterious subjects. The tentative title for it was Jimmy Akin's Book of the Weird. And I'd look at different mysterious subjects and evaluate them and say, okay, so what's the evidence here? Does this definitely exist? Does it definitely not exist? Is the evidence somewhere in the middle? And I thought about writing a book like that, but I hadn't ended up doing it. I became involved with a podcasting network known as StarQuest that does. It's a Catholic podcasting network, and it does a form of low-level evangelization by engaging pop culture. So we have shows that I'm on, like The Secrets of Star Trek and The Secrets of Doctor Who, and we, talk about the shows, but we are talking about them with a Catholic viewpoint presupposed. And so we don't really get in people's faces, Catholic, Catholic, Catholic all the time. But we do have that as part of the show when it's appropriate. And the idea is that even if someone is not a Christian or not a Catholic, they can listen to the show and enjoy it and become fans of it, and they'll also get a Catholic perspective over the course of time. Well, a few years ago, we were looking at revitalizing our line of podcasts, and we were considering possibilities for what to do, and I mentioned the idea of doing a show centered on mysteries. And that was the beginning of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, and we've been doing it for almost 5 years, just over 5 years, and we're now up to 200, almost 240 episodes.
Wow, that's incredible. I haven't listened to them all. I'm full disclosure.
Sure.
I've listened to quite a number, and they are very enjoyable. There's ones that attract me more than others. I've really enjoyed the ones that you do on law enforcement and or those kind of things. Like the Son of Sam one, I found fascinating because I was growing up in the 70s as a young boy, and yeah, I remember that time. But
so do I. Yeah.
So we're probably about the same age or similar in age, and
yeah. For people who may not know, Son of Sam was a serial killer in New York in the 1970s, and eventually a man named David Berkowitz was arrested and convicted of the crimes, and he confessed, to killing people, but he also said he wasn't alone. That actually the Son of Sam murders were committed by a group of people who were involved in a kind of an occult group, and he has that part of the story hasn't gotten a lot of traction in the press, but I looked into it, and actually the evidence supports his claim that he was not alone in committing those murders. He's also, by the way, these days he's an evangelical Christian. He runs a prison ministry for other convicts, and he's very repentant of what he did, and very,
and you
very
covered
ashamed
that
of
well in the show, and it was. Some of those are very interesting, like you did Ruby Ridge. I'm a law enforcement officer. I've been doing it a little longer than you've been an apologist at Catholic Answers. I just started my 34th year. So that's where it's interesting to get other takes on like Waco and Ruby Ridge like you did. And yes,
I've done both of those.
Yeah, and we're always looking as police officers at other people's shortcomings. What can we do better? I think in Canada we tend to do a little better. probably one of the things is probably the amount of law enforcement agencies that you have involved in any one situation, which is hard for command and control purposes.
Yeah, there's also been a militarization of the police in the United States that I think is very unhealthy.
Okay. That,
Incidentally, I don't know if you've seen it, but I did a two-parter. I won't spoil it, but I did a two-part story on Mysterious World about a woman named Pauline Dakin, Dakin. And the first part of it's called Pauline Dakin's Secret Childhood. And the second part is called Pauline Dakin and the Weird World. And it involves law enforcement. And it is an amazing story. So I won't spoil it for you, but if law enforcement and Canada are your interests, check out the two-part Pauline Dakin story. It is wild.
Okay. I think I remember listening. I'm not positive, but I will definitely be checking it out. Actually, I have a question on that topic. Have you ever covered, I know you've covered a lot of topics. Have you ever covered like police officers' gut feelings or spidey senses or something like that?
I have. I'm aware of this, and I have some plans for future episodes to talk about the paranormal in law enforcement. I did one episode, which was actually a mystery that was here in San Diego, about a Border Patrol agent, Luis Santiago, who died in the line of duty and then apparently came back as a ghost.
Oh,
and tracked down the man who killed him. And this was well known among the local Border Patrol agents. I've talked to people who work from the Border Patrol, and they say, "Oh yeah, we all know about Luis Santiago." And so I did an episode on that. I have plans to do additional episodes exploring the paranormal aspect of law enforcement. I know some psychics that have been used by law enforcement agencies that have had successful case resolutions. And of course, as I don't know about your law enforcement agency, but here in the United States, they actually do have psychics that they will consult when they've reached an impasse on a case. They don't talk about it a lot in public because they don't want the negative publicity that would generate. But there are psychics who specialize in trying to help law enforcement and give them information that will add to their case file and help them crack the case. And I know psychics who've done that and plan on interviewing them in the future.
Yeah, and I'm not aware of that in my jurisdiction, but we did enjoy the TV show Psych.
I haven't. I've watched a few episodes of Psych, not that many. I watched The Mentalist though all the way through.
Oh yeah, I watched. We enjoyed that one too. So you talked about Robert Stack, and I remember watching that show. As
He was a law
man.
enforcement guy. He was back in the Depression fighting bootleggers in the Untouchables, right?
Yeah, he. But
for people who may not know, for people who may not know, Robert Stack did play Elliot Ness, but he was just acting.
Yeah. Have you ever done one on the mysterious staircase in Santa Fe?
Yeah. So we haven't filmed it yet. It'll be in the next couple of episodes we film. But I have written the script for the spiral staircase, and so the script for that is already in the can, and we'll be recording it. We'll be recording it next month.
That's awesome. I went there as a young man. My parents took me there. We were there at Christmas, and then shortly after our trip down there, Robert Stack did it on Unsolved Mysteries. And then I've been back a couple times since, taking my kids, and then I took Jeff Cavins and our group on our motorcycle ride to go see it. It's something else to see. So
Yeah, for folks who may not be aware, there is a group of Sisters of Loretto in frontier era New Mexico who had a chapel built, and and then through some rather dramatic circumstances, the architect of the chapel died, and they didn't have a way to get up to their choir loft, and so the chapel was configured in such a way that they couldn't place a ladder and just climb up. They're wearing those long habits, and so they couldn't really use
it was
a ladder.
a girls' school, so girls didn't normally climb the ladders. It was the men, right?
Yeah,
So,
and also they couldn't put a longer staircase because it would run into pews. And they made a novena to St. Joseph, and then a workman showed up reportedly on the 9th day of the novena, offered to build the staircase for them, and he built them this spiral staircase so that it wouldn't interfere with the pews, and they could then use that. And there's been a question about who was this guy that built the staircase. The staircase itself is quite impressive. And because he showed up after the novena to St. Joseph, there was wondering about, could this have been an apparition of St. Joseph himself that built it? Whether it was him or not, though, they did pray to St. Joseph, and then someone showed up, so there's answered prayer. But this one has now been solved. And
okay.
So we now know who it was that built the staircase, and I'll be revealing that in the episode.
I look forward to hearing that one. That's awesome. I don't know if it's awesome. I look forward to hearing it because we've been putting on men's conferences here in Calgary for 25 years annually, and we do a novena to St. Joseph to start every one of those. And he's done some miraculous things for us over the years. The first couple, I'd get an envelope with $1,000 in my mailbox of cash for the conference, and where'd this come from? I didn't investigate too thoroughly because it came from somebody knowing that we needed it, but whether St. Joseph inspired them or and we've done it for every motorcycle ride. We've done it for anything large that we've undertaken. We've done a novena to St. Joseph, and he's a good friend of mine, as you can tell behind me.
Indeed, yeah. Awesome. Incidentally, one thing I thought I'd mention, now you like in particular the law enforcement related episodes of Mysterious World, and we cover a whole bunch of mysterious subjects. In law enforcement, like true crime mysteries, are part of what we do. They're not a big part of what we do because, much to my surprise, after we started the show, I started getting messages from families saying, we love your show. Our whole family listens, including our very small children. And so, and they appreciate the fact the show is family friendly. So true crime, especially like grisly murders and stuff, can kind of make it not family friendly. So I don't do a lot of true crime. When I do, number one, I keep it clinical, so I don't go into gory, sensationalistic details. Like when we did Son of Sam, I just said this woman got shot, and I didn't describe it beyond that. And then this other person got shot, and didn't go into details. But I also warn parents at the beginning of the episode if there's going to be something like a murder coming up, and assure them it will be clinical, but you should be aware of that in making decisions for your family. Because I don't want parents surprised by what their children are hearing.
And that's much appreciated.
Yeah.
Very much appreciated.
I also just completed, and this won't air till next year, but I just completed a 2-part true crime story set in 1933 in New York. So this is in the Prohibition era. It's in the Great Depression. Times are desperate. And a group of men who were later nicknamed the Murder Trust decided to make insurance money by taking out insurance on a gentleman who was attending one of the speakeasy that one of them owned, and arranged for him to leave Earth. And so his name was Mike Malloy, and he has an amazing story. He not only survived and just refused to die, no matter what they did to him, for months. I mean, they used like 9 different plans on him. They had to come up with 9 different ways of murdering him.
Wow.
Some of which they tried multiple times. And he just kept refusing to die and was oblivious that his friends were even trying to take his life. They finally, after months and months of trying, did succeed. Plan 9 actually worked. But these guys were not the most competent professional murderers ever. And the whole thing rapidly unwound. And so I've got a 2-parter where in the first part we tell you what they did to Iron Mike Malloy. He got the nickname Iron Mike because of how unkillable he was. And then we'll tell you the disaster that followed for the murder trust and how they just made really bad decisions that led to them being captured.
I look forward to that one. Well, I enjoy all of them. I don't, like I said, listen to them. Sometimes I pick and choose. Like I listened to the Jack Heald one just the other day. But so, what do you do for fun?
Oh, I watch a little bit of media. You know, like I watch Star Trek and Doctor Who, which is also I turn those into podcasts with a couple of guys that I also watch them with. I watch. I'm not a big TV watcher. In fact, I don't even have cable anymore. But I do some streaming, and I like watching mystery shows like Columbo. You know, I've seen the whole run of Columbo more than once. I like watching period mystery shows. Recently, I watched the series Endeavor, which is the prequel to Inspector Morse, and it's set in the 1960s and now in the early 1970s. So not only do we have mysteries, but we have a look at the culture of the time. I occasionally will watch other things, like I'm a fan of the sitcom Community, which is a really creative sitcom and goes into some wild areas. Like it's set in a community college, and at one point the study group that the show focuses on has to conduct a coup to reclaim the school from the insane former Spanish teacher who has become the school's military dictator. And they need assistance from the secret worldwide alliance of air conditioning repairmen in order to take back the school. So it gives you a sense of how weird some of the plots can get. Lately, I have been watching a pair of series, one of them from the BBC, one of them from here in America. Both are called Ghosts. And it's about a young couple, one in Britain, one here in America, that are trying to run a bed and breakfast, but the wife gets into an accident, she has a near-death experience, and when she wakes up from that, she can see all the ghosts that inhabit their house from different time periods. And so you get some nice cultural interaction, including people with viewpoints from different time periods. And that's a lot of fun. I also dance. There hasn't been a lot of this over COVID, but I teach, and I both dance myself, and I teach and call 5 different forms of dance: square dancing, contra dancing, English country dancing, Morris dancing, and community dancing.
Wow!
And I also choreograph those forms of dance. And I do Mysterious World, for which I do research and about a 30-page script every week. And so I'm always learning something and trying to learn more.
you should another one you might like for a brain candy show is called Scorpion, where it's all geniuses and they go and solve problems for Homeland Security. And
Oh, okay.
so
I'm not familiar with that. I'll check it out.
yeah, he's allegedly got an IQ of 197 or something, or I forget what it is exactly, but he's supposed to have the smartest guy in the world. So and,
Okay.
and then so we also talk about food. Is there a go-to dish that you prepare that keeps friends coming back? Or
Well, one that I have made multiple times that people have enjoyed a lot and would ask me to do for them is jambalaya. And I make a spicy jambalaya that people have really enjoyed and would ask me to make for them like every year at Easter. I these days I don't cook a lot because I'm a widower and my wife and I didn't have children, unfortunately, and so I live alone. And so it's just me. It's not worth making a big cooking project. I also I do intermittent fasting, so I only eat one meal a day, and then I have a 22-hour fasting window.
so you're doing that every day? Because we listened to your episode on that, and my wife and I are quite interested in that. Is it so? You're doing that every single day, like?
On Sundays, I don't, because it's the Lord's Day, and so and this is kind of like a medieval practice that the monks would do. Historically, most monks ate only one meal a day, but they would have two on Sundays. And
Okay.
so I do something similar. I normally have only one meal a day, at least if I'm following the fasting strictly. I have one meal a day, and then I allow myself to have extra food on Sundays and holy days of obligation. But it's not a lot of extra food because once your stomach shrinks, I mean, it doesn't physically shrink, but once your appetite goes down and your tolerance for food goes down, you can't eat as much. And so it still tends to be not a huge amount of food even on those days.
And how? And I forget exactly when you did that. How long have you been doing the intermittent fasting? And you also did the low carb thing, if I recall.
Yeah, I did low carb for like a decade, and initially I had great results with it. So at my peak, I was 318 pounds. At
Okay.
least that's the highest number I recall seeing on a scale. I may have gone slightly above that, but I was over 300 pounds. And I lost like 80 pounds on low carb. And I was low carb for a decade. Eventually, though, I hit a plateau, and I could not break through that plateau. And this is something that will happen with low carb and with other like low fat diets and so forth. So I could not get through that, and I started regaining some weight. And my doctor recommended intermittent fasting, and eventually I learned enough about it that I was willing to try it. And so I've been intermittent fasting for, I would guess, 3 or 4 years, and
Oh, wow.
that got me through the plateau. And
Okay.
for the first time, it's like, okay, I'm in charge of my weight now, because because it is within my control. If I do not like my current weight, I can either lengthen the fast or reduce the amount of food I eat during my eating window. And one way or another, my body will be forced to lose weight. And that's actually a very natural thing. There's a lot of bad diet advice these days, and people will say, oh, no, you should be eating constantly, like in small quantities. And that's really bad advice, because what happens every time you eat food is your body turns it into blood sugar, and it goes out into your bloodstream, and your cells will eat part of it, but they don't eat all of the blood sugar. And so we can only have our blood sugar in a fairly small tolerance range before we start having negative side effects. If the blood sugar is too high, it will damage the cells, which is why diabetes causes a lot of health problems. And so to prevent the blood sugar from going too high, your body releases insulin. And what insulin does is it tells your cells to take the blood sugar out of the bloodstream and put it into fat storage cells. So conserve this for the future. And, excuse me just a second. So if you're eating frequently, which is not what humans were designed to do. I mean, evolutionarily, we grew up in a food scarce environment. That's why we have fat in the first place, is to store the energy for us for when we need it. And so fasting has been part of the human experience for tens of thousands of years. But if you're constantly eating, then or very frequently eating, then you're getting very frequent blood sugar spikes, very frequent insulin releases, and very frequently storing that energy in your cells as fat. And you never get into a mode where you're burning the fat. And so the way to actually start burning the fat that you've stored is by not eating for a longer period of time, just like our ancestors did. And we have a certain amount of energy that's stored in the form of glycogen that's suspended in water-soluble form in our livers. It can take a couple of days to burn through that glycogen, but then once you've burned through the glycogen, you will start using the fat. And that's when actual weight loss begins. Incidentally, that glycogen burn is also why people who start a diet will frequently lose 5 to 10 pounds very quickly, and then the weight loss will slow down. And the reason for that is that's what they're burning through is the water-soluble glycogen. And they then release the water that it was suspended in, so you lose the water weight first before you start losing the fat weight.
Fascinating. Sounds like you've done a little research in this.
I have, yes.
So one of the questions I ask my guests is, a lot of young men are struggling even knowing what a man is. So what advice do you give your 18-year-old self?
Oh, boy. Well, talking to my 18-year-old self, I don't know that I had any issues with manhood. What I do remember having issues with at 18 were I didn't have faith at that point, so I'd give my 18-year-old self some information about faith and its importance in life, and specifically the Catholic faith. I also would tell him to lighten up and be more relaxed and be less intense and be less angry, be more loving, think about things more from other people's perspectives and see the good in what they're trying to do. Don't be jaded and cynical and hypercritical all the time. And in general, I'd encourage myself to be happier and, not be as focused on negative things in life, which I was, like a lot of teenagers. They can be very cynical and very down on things. And I'd say, look, you're only making yourself miserable by that. You'll be happier if you keep on the sunny side, if you think more about positive things and aren't just relentlessly hypercritical.
Thank you. And then finally, like Jeff Caven talks about riding with your posse. Mm-hmm. Who are your go-to saints? Who are
Well, the saints that I pray to the most would be the Virgin Mary and Saint Joseph and Saint Michael the Archangel. I also pray to my own guardian angel, and I have affinities for other saints. I don't pray to them as much as the big four that I just named, but Saint Augustine, Abraham, actually, Saint Paul, and those are some of the ones that speak to me the most. Not in a paranormal way, but in terms of a heart connection.
A lot in common. Saint Michael and Saint Joseph are are with me all the time. St. Michael's the patron saint of police officers, and
Ah,
St. Joseph. I was born on March 24th, so my dad stepped into a church, and I was Sean Patrick, and then I became Sean Patrick Joseph, because this is hard to believe. Back then, he asked if he could go to the hospital to check on his wife and new baby, his first baby, and Sergeant said, "Is mom fine? Yep. Baby fine? Yep. Keep walking the beat, boy." So I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to visit us here in the pub. And I don't know if you know that the term whiskey comes from a Gaelic term called Ishkabaha, which means water of life.
it derived from Latin roots, yes.
And my prayer is that you continue to lead many souls to the true water of life. And thank you for all you do for our faith.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the invitation and for all you do as well.
Maybe one of these days when I'm in San Diego, I might have to call you up if you're making jambalaya. So, and if you're ever in Calgary, we'll take good care of you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
I hope you are enjoying this content. Please like and subscribe, share with a friend. Also, go to godsquad.ca where you can pray with us and for us, and consider donating so that we can continue our mission, reaching men wherever they're at. Thank you. As